What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another car review. This is of course the 2021 Toyota Corolla Apex Edition. Huge thanks to Toyota for providing me here with the Apex Edition of the Corolla to review for you guys today. So about the Apex Edition here, well, this is an SE model that I have here. It's also available with the XSE, but the SE is the only way you get the manual, which this one has. And so as far as the exterior goes on the Apex, so the whole vehicle is a little bit sportier, supposed to have better handling, and that's also reflected with the sportier looks here on the outside. So you start with the same basic fundamentals as any other Corolla, which I think is a very nice looking vehicle. I've already reviewed the hatchback and the regular sedan. I just love these J-lamp LED headlamps you have here up front. They're just a really cool look. And then this one, has this aero kit because it's the Apex Edition, so you have, the more aggressive splitter there in the front with the gold accents around everything, which I think is a really nice touch, especially on this black one. I think it really kind of sets it off nicely. And so it gives it a little bit more of a sportier look up front here, a little more aggressive, especially again in black. I think this looks really, really cool because the Apex Edition also blacks out all the badges, the wheels, all that kind of stuff. So this really gives it a really stealthy look. It's also sitting on some new springs that make it 0.6 inches lower than before. So that certainly helps give it a little bit more of a hunkered down look than before too. The sides are cool, so you have these 18-inch wheels that are larger than the normal 16-inch wheels you get on a regular SE Corolla. These wheels are also 2.2 pounds lighter than the regular 18-inch wheels you get on like an XSE, and so 2.2 pounds lighter on each wheel, it certainly helps reduce the unsprung mass, which is very cool. And they're also on these sportier SP Sport Max tires from Dunlop. And then I also love the side skirts there, which again have more of that gold trim and kind of flips up towards the rear there a little bit. And then going out to the back there, again, very sporty, everything's very stealthy, all the badges are blacked out, so it kind of flies under the radar a little bit. You still have the sportier bumpers and stuff you get on an SE version of the Corolla, but again, the aero kit kind of accentuates that. You also have a spoiler. Now the spoiler is optional on the Apex trims. I think it's like $300 and some extra, so you don't have to get an Apex Edition with the spoiler, but I think it's a very mild spoiler, kind of nicely jazzes up the back end of this vehicle, so I think that's worth getting. And you also have a catback exhaust here on the Apex Edition, so that nicely pokes out there from the passenger side, and I think looks nice. So yeah, otherwise it's just the same kind of middle of the road back end here on the Corollas with the taillights and stuff. Nothing too radical, but I think it's a very attractive look that will age well. And so yeah, overall I think that the new Corolla already looked really good in my opinion, and this Apex version kind of turns it up just a little bit more, and I think it looks even better for it. All right, so starting to go for a drive. The Corolla here just has the basic Toyota key that has just the name of the car there on it, which is always nice. A couple of buttons on the back, and that's it. It's nice and thin though, nice and light. Feels a little cheap, but honestly, it's a nice looking key, so I don't mind it. And of course, the Corollas here, even with the SE trim, are keyless access, keyless entry, and push button start, proximity key and everything, which is great. So you just leave the key in your pocket, hit the engine start button, and it starts right up. And if you're curious to hear about the interior in the Corolla SE, my wife and I actually just did a full in-depth interior review on this car, so I will link that above. You can go watch that if you want to see all the details of this interior. Overall, the SE trim is pretty nice. It's a little more stripped down than the XSEs that I reviewed in the past, but it still is a nice interior for an economy car that starts at, in the low $20,000, for a reasonably equipped one. You get a lot of car for the money with automatic climate control, nice large touchscreen, all that kind of stuff. They do a really nice job. There's some soft touch materials, which you don't often get in a lot of other vehicles in this segment. And overall, I think it's, pretty simple, but a pretty nice interior. All right, so setting off here in the 2021 Corolla Apex Edition. So the first thing you probably notice is that I'm in the very rare manual transmission version. They've only made 120 in a manual out of the 6,000 of these Apex Editions that they're making, which isn't an awful lot, honestly, for a Corolla. They build tons of these things. But yeah, so this is one of 120 vehicles. I'm not sure why a sporty version of the Corolla, it's so hard to get a manual in, considering you can get a manual in any other version of the Corolla very easily. But yeah, so that is the reality here with that. It's a nice manual though. I love this manual in the regular Corollas, and it's the same here in this. There's no changes. Nice and widely spaced gears, so it's very easy to find every gear. You're never going to miss a shift or anything like that. The clutch is a little tricky because the throttle response is kind of dead for the first little bit of travel, and so that sometimes can allow you to be a little bit aggressive on the clutch and cause it to kind of bog down a little bit. So that just takes a little bit of getting used to, but it's a nice light clutch. And there's also the intelligent manual transmission button down here, and that will give you auto rev match downshifts as well as smoothening out the throttle to help you with better engagement. So this is a really good car to learn manual transmission on. if that's something you want to try out here. This is a really easy manual to learn stick on. So anyway, other things here. Visibility is fantastic in the Corollas. They are just like insane with the visibility. Massive windshield. You have nice thin A-pillars, a huge window right by your mirror, and the mirror is off onto the door. So great view out of the sides here. The windows come nice and low too, so you really got a good view out of the sides. View out of the back is also really good in typical sedan fashion. And yeah, so other things here, throttle response, like I said, a little bit more dead than I would like. For the first, I'd say, quarter travel, it doesn't really do much, and then it starts to do stuff. So you have to be a little more liberal with your throttle inputs here in the Corolla, and that also applies to accelerating, which I'll get to here in a second. Also, the brakes do have a nice little bit of bite as you start, dipping into them, so they're pretty responsive, but whenever you're up at speed, they don't feel particularly strong. And supposedly these wheels, the new design does help with brake cooling, they say, a little bit. I'm not sure how much, but so that should help you a little bit more, but I don't know how many people are going to really be pushing the stock brakes on a regular Corolla anyway. This also does have that catback exhaust, but as you can hear, whenever you're off throttle, it's really quiet. And even when you're on throttle, this is like half throttle, you hear it a little bit. It is louder than a regular Corolla, which I appreciate, but it's not as loud as you might be expecting for a catback exhaust. It's not branded as a TRD catback or anything like that, so maybe there are some more louder options, and of course the aftermarket can help you out as well. But so it doesn't give you a whole lot more volume. I kind of wish it did a little bit more. But let's turn down onto this back road here. There's no sport mode or anything, and here we go. Chirping the tires there in second. All right, so it gets up and moves pretty well. So these cars aren't fast. They don't feel fast, and this is one of those cars, though, that is still fun to drive because it's the driving a slow car fast kind of mentality. If you can full throttle it everywhere you go, this is full throttle, not doing a whole lot. So the 0 to 60 time is about 7.5 seconds here with the manual. I think it's closer to 8 if you get the automatic CVT version. But anyway, it runs a naturally aspirated 2-liter 4-cylinder engine. It does 169 horsepower and 151 pound-feet of torque. So that torque is what you're really missing out on, because a lot of the turbocharged competitors, like the Civic and stuff, they have a lot more torque and a lot more punch down low. This doesn't have a whole lot, especially with the manual. You really got to row these gears if you want to get into the meat of the power band. But a lot of the other competitors that do have a turbo, they seem to be a little bit punchier. But there are some naturally aspirated competitors as well. But yeah, so but I actually don't mind it. It's a really fun car to just drive hard all the time, and you often are going full throttle just to get up to speed on normal roads many times. So if you're someone who enjoys really wringing out a car, this is going to be a lot of fun. Other things here about it. So the suspension has been retuned. There's these new springs, and there's new struts as well, and so that helps to give this a 0.6-inch lower ride height for some sportier handling. Then we also have these Dunlop SP Sport Max tires too, which are sportier setup, and it's great they give you a summer tire here as an option on these. And so so we were just on a rougher road here. There it is again. You hear some road noise. It's the same as any other Corolla. They didn't really change that a whole lot. But we're coming up some corners here, and let's see how the Corolla handles. Do the auto rev match. Works great. And pitching it in. All right, so it handles really well. Honestly, though, I had no complaints with the standard Corolla handling. I thought it was still great, and a huge leap over the old Corolla. The gears are fairly short, though, because this is just second gear, and it still is going up to pretty high RPMs here, but nice and grippy and well controlled as far as the handling too. There's no body roll. Again, there wasn't much in a regular Corolla, but this is, I'd say, a little bit grippier for sure, because you have the sportier tires. They're 225 wide, by the way, and so that'll definitely give you better grip. So it's been a couple years since I drove a regular Corolla, but I don't remember having grip issues in those. But again, more grip is always welcome. And so they also retuned the steering here in the Corolla. So you have heavier steering, and that is one thing that is much more noticeable, I think, compared to a regular Corolla, which has really light steering and feels a little more eager to turn in. This feels a little more hesitant to turn in, but it's just because of the steering weight. It's still more than happy to turn in. It's still a nice light vehicle. It only weighs 3,055 pounds. So, it definitely doesn't feel heavy or anything. It's just, it gives you a little bit of a weightier feel because of the heavier steering. So you kind of have to put a little more muscle into, you know, switchbacks and stuff like that if you're really, you know, carving up a back road. But I like the heavier steering, but honestly, I loved the light steering of the regular Corolla. It really just made it feel super eager. And so honestly, I think I prefer a regular Corolla as far as the steering goes. So those are a couple of the changes they made. They also did a few other changes, like there's, I guess, stiffer anti-roll bars now, and they also have bump stops that are changed a little bit to help give you a little bit of a better ride, even with that stiffer suspension. And so on a back road here, the suspension is a welcome change because it is, you know, a little bit flatter and stuff. But I don't know if it's worth the sacrifice because, like I said, regular Corolla handled fine. And whenever you're going over bumps, and not even like potholes, but even if you're just going over like undulations in the road, I noticed that this really likes to hop around, especially the back end likes to kind of hop around a little bit, and I don't love that. It gives it a rougher ride than it needs to have. And again, you know, I think they tried to stiffen it up a little bit too much, possibly, because a regular Corolla handled fine. More corners here. Yeah, wow, the front end grip is definitely better. The more and more that I push it, the more that I kind of see that is definitely much better. The grip from the tires is better. It feels definitely a little more glued to the road than the regular Corolla. So I think that's one of the things that certainly helps. And I'm sure that slightly lighter wheels help as well. But man, this thing does handle like it's on rails. It really is impressive. And I really like the way the Corolla handles. I like the performance until you look at the price tag. This one, even the, you know, stripped out SE model, not even the XSE, SE with the stick, which is cheaper than the automatic, you're still, this one's almost $26,500. And I'll get a little more into the pricing later on in the video here, but you know, there's lots of other options that are faster, that actually do handle better, have more handling hardware like limited slip differentials, all kind of stuff, for the same money or even less money, and also give you some more creature comforts and stuff. So again, I will expand on that a little bit more here in a minute. But in a vacuum, the Corolla is a good handling car. It's fun, and I like it a lot. But anyway, thanks to Toyota, I'm going to have the Corolla here for the next week, so I'm going to drive around all over the place. I'll come back and give you guys my final real-world fuel economy, as well as my thoughts on that pricing and its competition, and anything else that I noticed during my week of driving as well. Alright, so I've been driving the Apex Edition here for a week now, and you know, it's an enjoyable thing to drive. I think the ride's just a little bit too stiff, and it's unnecessarily stiff, you know, considering there's sportier things in this segment that have a, you know, much more comfortable ride than this, so I think it doesn't have to be this stiff to have good handling. So that's still really my only complaint with the driving dynamics here of the Apex Edition. Otherwise, you know, it's the same great Corolla goodness that I've enjoyed in the past. You know, the engine's a little slow to rev up, so rev matching your downshifts on your own can be a little bit tricky, but you do have the IMT mode here that you know, will rev match for you. But the IMT, by the way, it doesn't always rev match every single gear. So like I just went down to second and I had the IMT on, and it didn't do the rev for me. So there's been some times where it doesn't do it unless you're up at some higher speeds, and so that's the only you know, thing about that. It's not perfect, because even in like my Mustang Bullet, which has rev matching, that will every single time give me a rev match no matter what the speed is. It'll always do that, and so that's the only little other downside here. But otherwise, you know, it's a nice thing to drive. So the last two things to mention though are the fuel economy and the pricing here of the Corolla Apex Edition. So first off, fuel economy. I averaged over about 90 miles of driving, 24.2 mpg, which isn't great because these are rated at 28 in the city, 35 on the highway, and 31 combined. And so yes, I am almost an entire 4 mpg less than the city rating. Generally, I'll do maybe 2 mpg less than the city rating in most of the vehicles that I review. And this being a naturally aspirated 4-cylinder, I didn't think it would be hard to get close to that city rating. But for some reason, I am way below the city rating here. I don't know why. I haven't been driving this thing super hard. I mean, yes, it's a manual, and you do have to rev it out to get decent acceleration out of it. So maybe I'm just driving it harder, but I'm literally just going around with normal stop and go traffic, suburban traffic and stuff. I'm not, you know, racing around in this thing. So that's a little bit of a disappointment, but you know, I guess you can potentially get better fuel economy, especially if you get one of the CVT versions, because those do much better with gas, and also the CVT version is going to be the one you're actually going to be able to find. Since they're only doing 120 of these manuals, I mean, forget about even trying to find one in a manual, sadly. So you'll probably end up with a CVT if you do actually get an Apex Edition, and the CVT should get slightly better fuel economy by the EPA's ratings, and also I think it'll help you to hypermile a little bit better so you resist the temptation to rev it out like I am here with the manual. The last thing to mention though about this vehicle is the pricing of the Apex Edition, which is its biggest problem hands down. So this one as tested is $26,455, and this, by the way, is the base SE version, which, you know, has cloth seats, no heated seats, you know, has the simpler gauges, I mean, all that kind of stuff. And you can get the Apex Edition with the XSE trim, which does give you leather, heated seats, and that kind of stuff. But then those are over $29,000 for, again, a vehicle that has 169 horsepower and 151 pound-feet of torque. 29 grand is just crazy. So 26,500 basically for this car, and that is a tough sell. And it's going to be even a little bit more expensive, by the way, if you can't find one of these manual ones. The automatics are a few $100s more. So realistically, you're looking at probably almost 27 grand. And that just, it doesn't make any sense at that price point. If you do any kind of cross shopping whatsoever, this is going to fall in dead last as far as value for performance. So my top 3 sedan competitors right off the bat here. First, we have the Kia Forte GT, which is the most affordable and I think the best value in this segment. That, if you want to get it with a manual, you're at like $2,200 cheaper than this, and you have 201 horsepower with a turbocharged engine, 195 pound-feet of torque, so way quicker than this, has a nicer interior than this. I mean, all kinds of stuff for, you know, over $2,000 less, and you have a way faster car. Again, only 169 horsepower here. That is the big downfall of this thing at this price. And so that's just the first thing, and that's, again, 2 grand less, and we're talking about Kia pricing as well, which means you might have a little bit more of a discount than what you might get with a Toyota as well, especially one as rare as this Apex Edition. So there's that. And then if you even want to get the dual clutch automatic version of the Forte GT and get a fully loaded version which has like a GT2 package on it, so you have heated and ventilated seats that are leather, all kinds of nice luxuries like that, wireless phone charger, all that kind of stuff, those are still going to be cheaper than one of these. Even one of those with that automatic is going to be, I think, roughly about $1,000 less than an automatic Apex Edition, and it's even cheaper than this manual base bare bones cloth seat, no heated seat SE version of the Apex for a fully loaded, you know, Forte GT with all the luxuries. So that's, I think, the biggest value and the one that undercuts this the most. But there's a lot of others that are well-respected names that come in cheaper than this. So you have, for example, the Honda Civic Si. That is actually $300 exactly cheaper than this. And Civic Si, again, gives you over 200 horsepower. You have almost 200 pound-feet of torque. You have a little bit of a roomier vehicle, actually, by the way, with the Civic, which is a nice little, you know, added benefit. Now, the Civic is also manual only, so that's the deal breaker there. You're going to have to go to the Forte if you want the automatic in this price range, you know, as far as competitors go. So, but if you're okay with the manual, Civic Si is great. I just spent a week with one of those a few months back. Loved it. It's a great experience. You also get heated seats, by the way, in even those base Civic Si's, again, which is not featured here in this. And now those are only cloth seats as well in the Civic Si. So a little bit more of a basic setup, but again, more power, more luxury. You also have a limited slip differential in the Civic Si. Just so many perks of that. Again, for less money than this. And finally, the other really strong competitor in this segment is the Volkswagen Jetta GLI, which I also spent a week with one of those. Really fun car, really good handling still. That also has a limited slip differential, and the Jetta GLI is only about $700 more expensive, so it is a little bit more than this. But for that $700 extra, you get over 100 extra pound-feet of torque. Those do like 258 pound-feet of torque in those Jetta GLIs. You have 228 horsepower, so even a little bit more than what you get with the Civic SIs. And that's also just for a base Volkswagen, but they also still come very nicely equipped with a standard, you know, Jetta GLI interior. So anyone who's really serious about performance, I don't think would look at this Apex Edition, because those are just the new vehicles you can buy for, you know, the same money or less money. You know, it's kind of crazy. Those are really going to be the best values if you're actually looking for the most horsepower per dollar and the best handling per dollar, because it's not like any of those three sacrificed handling. I'd say they're all at least as good at handling as this Corolla, if not better. And so, you know, that's just where, sadly, I like the Corolla. It's a good little car. If you're scared of turbochargers, you know, this could be a, you know, good option for you, I suppose. But outside of that, this just doesn't make any sense. And that's kind of the unfortunate thing about this. I think what the Apex version does show is the potential of this Corolla platform. And I'm hoping, you know, a GR Corolla is coming down the road sooner rather than later. And when it does, you know, hopefully it will be priced competitively. But I'm a little bit skeptical if they're going to be asking, you know, this much money for this Apex Edition, and they're already struggling to undercut, you know, all those established competitors. I'm worried that a Corolla, you know, GR is going to end up being $30,000 or something, and just, you know, I don't know if it's going to outperform those for, you know, all the extra money. I hope that they, again, make that a little bit more competitive with the pricing and the horsepower and stuff. But in the meantime, you know, like I said, this just kind of shows off what they can do with that platform just as a starting point. And I think they can get a lot better than what they've done here with this as well. You know, maybe making the ride a little bit smoother without giving up the handling and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so that's the unfortunate reality of the Corolla Apex Edition here. Cool looking little car. It's got Toyota reliability, which is great if you're into that, and that's something that's really important to you. You don't have to worry about the turbos and all the higher performing competitors. But if you care about speed, performance, handling, any of the above, I think you're better off with the competition, sadly. But yes, that's about it as far as all my thoughts here on the Apex Edition. Let me know your thoughts on it in the comments below. Huge thanks to Toyota for providing me here with the Apex Edition to review for you guys today. And yeah, thank you guys very much for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Take care.